This summer, I was at a pool party with my best friends from high school. We try to get together every couple years with all of our husbands, all our kids, and obviously with all those schedules, it's tricky, but we managed to do one pool party. So the kids are splashing and playing, and the adults are all kind of catching up, and we keep saying, "It's so good to see you. We should do this more often." And we all want to. Then it's jobs and kids and work schedules and in-laws and baptisms and soccer practice and hockey practice and all this stuff. And so we're all talking about it. We're all talking about how crowded our lives feel and how much pressure we feel when we look at our calendars and how much of it is already kind of set in stone, it feels like. So we're having this conversation about how full and heavy life feels right now. And we talk, and then finally one person says, "But what are you going to do?" That's how those conversations end, right? You talk about it and you feel it, and then none of us know how to get out of what we're in. And so you say something like, "But what are you going to do?" I had kind of a similar moment several years ago. Aaron and I were talking with two pastors, kind of a young pastor and then like a more seasoned, that's like a nice way, like an old guy. But he'd been doing church work for decades. And the young pastor was telling the story of how his church just sort of exploded. Like it just happened. And the way he was telling the story was almost like he didn't even understand how it happened. Like, no, I had nothing to do with it. It just like erupted. It was just like an explosion. It's like he wanted us to know it was just something entirely incomprehensible. And the older pastor kind of gently said to him, "Well, I mean, you did some things. It's okay to say that. It's okay to say you had a plan and you asked people to get involved and you worked out all these things." And he said, "No, it just happened. We didn't do anything." And the older pastor said, "Well, you did something. I mean, at the very least, you decided to put up more chairs." And Aaron and I were like it did not even occur to us that you could decide to put a limitation, for example, on your church, on the size of your church, on the size of your life, on the size of your schedule, on the size of your to-do list. We kind of grew up in this like more is more, faster is better, bigger is better kind of mindset. And the idea that you could intentionally make something smaller or simpler, that we get to decide the size and scope and weight of our churches, of our family schedules, of our own very lives, felt really surprising and really exciting to us. I love the word yes. Like I'm kind of like that's like one of those things that's like it's so me, it's so who I am, it's so how I am. I love stripes. I love life on the water. I love flip-flops. I love cheese of any kind, especially, I know this is controversial, I love any kind of fake cheese product. Like if you can get it at a baseball game and it's like in a silver thing that they keep warm for like years, that's totally my jam. I love ponytails and hooded sweatshirts. I love playing on the beach with my kids. I love to read. I am the biggest bookworm ever. And so there are all these things that just bubble up in me. I love the smell of lavender. I love really dry champagne. I love to cook. I especially love to cook in the kitchen with my friends. I love that sound where your fingers squeak on an acoustic guitar. Well, not my fingers, because I can only play 2 songs, and they're the same. It's Wild Thing and Amazing Grace. It's just the same. You just sing the words at a different spot. But I love that tiny little squeak, right, of your fingers on a guitar. I love green apples. I love blueberries. I love picking cherries early in the season. And I love the word yes. To me, yes says possibility, adventure, yes to challenge, yes to showing up, yes to diving in. I love swimming with my clothes on, yes to swimming with your clothes on. I love what it says about life and energy and possibility. I had this amazing experience a couple years ago. I was invited to go on this trip, and it was with a lot of people that I didn't know, but I went anyway. And a friend of mine who had been on the same trip the year before, I was sitting at O'Hare ready to fly out to this like total unknown. And I texted my friend and I was like, what am I getting myself into? He's like, I'm not telling you anything, but jump, say yes, hog the coconut shrimp. And that did not help me at all. I had no idea what any of that meant. Then I got there and I made a couple friends right away. And I said, I have no idea what's about to happen to us, but this is what I know. Jump, say yes, hog the coconut shrimp. And so one of the first things we did, we were jumping off cliffs. Well, we weren't, the boys were. So it was kind of one of those things where like the boys were jumping off cliffs and I couldn't kind of tell, like, are the girls gonna do it too? Do I wanna be like the only girl? I don't know. And so I was just pulling back a little bit and one of the first friends that I had made yells back at me, Shauna, I thought we said yes. Don't we say yes? And there I went off the cliff because we say yes. And that became kind of a code word for the way we wanted to live, wholehearted and brave and jumping in and showing up. And so it sort of took on a life of its own. After that trip, we would text each other all across the country. Are you saying yes? What have you said yes to recently? What are you showing up to? So I have a sweatshirt that says, say yes. I have a yes tote bag. I have yes earrings. I have a yes tattoo. I'm like big into yes. But I found at a certain point that essentially I had said so many yeses that I couldn't possibly live them all. I had crowded those yeses so many, one after another, after another, after another, that was what was actually happening is I was having to say no to some of the most important things in my life. I had sort of willy-nilly, indiscriminately said yes, 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 yes. And inadvertently, in doing that, what I realized is I was saying no to my own spiritual practices, to my health, to my soul, to my closest relationships. And so what I realized is that essentially I needed to rework that rhythm of yes and no. As I began to look closer, kind of take a closer look at these yeses, why was I saying them? What were they? And at what cost? It seemed to me that as I became more and more honest with myself, there were sort of three categories. The first one was I was saying too many yeses in my work life because I was so invested in them thinking I was a star performer. I wanted to be the most responsible, the highest capacity. I didn't want to let anyone down. I wanted to be like everyone's favorite pupil. I wanted a gold star for doing it all right. And so if yes to one deadline is good, then yes to two deadlines is better. Yes, I can get it done a week faster. Yes, I can do 3 or 4 more. If I can speak at one event, I can speak at 2 or 3 events. I wanted to be seen as able, as capable, as someone who would never let the team down. And so I kept saying yes and yes and yes in my work life. And then in my kind of relational world, I became the person that picked up the pieces for all sorts of people, that kind of overfunctioned in my role as friend, as daughter, as sister, as wife, as mother. I was the one that hosted every party. I was the one that picked up someone's kids and this and that. And I instead of saying some very healthy, no, I can't do that for you, or no, my family comes first, or no, I'm limited or tired in whatever, I just said yes. At the expense of my own health, the expense of my own family, the expense of my most central relationships. And then the third thing is I said yes too often to kind of my own ravenous appetites. I stayed up way too late reading and watching movies. I traveled too much. I ate too much. I bought too much. I went too many places. I just kind of slipped into this sort of gluttonous way of like more, more, more. The world is so beautiful. I think it came out of like a lovely lust for life, but it turned into just sort of a ravenous more, more, more. And that more, more, more left me exhausted and depleted. And unfortunately, so the bad news is, for a while, no is the only way that gets you back to a life of yes. I know that sounds crazy, but I had to systematically walk through every part of my life and walk back some of those yeses to rebuild a deeper yes, a truer, more honest yes. Essentially, when we talked about it before, what I had to do was I look at all the chairs I had set up. My job at this point in the journey was to take down some of those chairs, to right size my life and my schedule, my capacity, my rhythms, to intentionally make my life a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter, a little bit easier to carry. So no became the word that I had to use to reshape kind of the edges and the dimensions of my life. And as you can imagine, as a person who wants to live so much yes, this was difficult for me. And so it ended up, it was like I had to use training wheels first, and then I could get to the end of the driveway, and then I could get to the end of the street. It was like learning to walk for the first time. And so when I first would say no to people, sometimes I would say it with like so many disclaimers and qualifications that they really would be totally confused about what I was talking about. Or I would like overthink all of it. I'd be like, oh, I'm going to have to say no, but I love you. I love you very much. And my love for you has nothing to do with this. And I will be there for you. And the people are like, it's actually fine. But I had so much trouble learning to say those words, learning to look people in the eye and say, I'm not going to give you what you want right now. I'm not going to be your reliable person right now. I'm not going to show up and magically pick up the pieces anymore. And those were difficult choices. I found that one of the hardest situations for me was when I would have to disappoint someone, especially someone that I respected, or when someone would use sort of, let's say, ever so slightly shaming words, and I would have to continue with my choice anyway. So I remember one situation, I was really trying to learn this, but it was pretty difficult. Henry was in preschool. It was before Mac was born. And he went to this little preschool, and I was working on a book, and I did not have quite enough time to get the book done. So I really needed to use every second of the preschool time. So I would like come flying into the parking lot, I'd run him into his little class, I'd go tearing out to the coffee shop, type, then tearing back in, pick him up, and go home. And I really was barely gonna make my deadline if I used all of that time. But this preschool, they had a high level of parent involvement, which sort of is like, if I'm sending him to preschool, but I have to be there too, I feel like it sort of defeats the purpose. But it was like all the parents just dropped off their kids and just stayed, just colored and cut things out and played games. And I couldn't, because I had made this commitment to do this work that I really felt strongly about. I loved it. I felt called to it. But I remember there was one day there was a mom, and she was like, hey, can I have, $4 for this group gift for such and such? I'm sure. And she's like, I've been wanting to ask you for this for a long time, but you're just not around, because I was looking for you, and you're just like, because you're not around. And so I was going to maybe ask your husband, but he's like, not around. And I was like, no, I get it. I get it that you feel we are not around the preschool family environment enough. And it was like a knife in the heart for every working mom. One mom saying to another, you're not with your kids enough. That's like the lowest of low blows. And I remember going out to the car and being like, I'm going to do my work anyway. And I'm going to allow these parents to think I'm a flaky parent, but I'm going to do the work I feel called to do in this little segment of time. And I'm going to be the best parent I can outside of preschool time. I got an opportunity to work on a book to tell the story of a family and a restaurant, and it's just like totally up my alley. This is like my dream scenario. I love this family. I love this restaurant. I love what it would mean to be a part of it. Secretly, I've always wanted to work in a restaurant, and I never have. And they said that they would sometimes let me work there, like just practice, and I wouldn't really have any responsibilities because they wouldn't trust me because I have no experience. But I could pretend to work there. I mean, I was just like over the moon. Except I live in Chicago and this restaurant is in Seattle. And in order for me to do a good job on this project, in order to really do it, to really understand it, to be great at it, I'd have to spend so much of my time in a city that's not my city. And that was a hard one. And sometimes that's how it is. And I wish I could tell you that I had like a deep bubbling up of joy in my heart that I had done the right thing, but I really didn't. I just hated it. I just thought it was terrible. I wanted somehow cosmically to find more space and time and wrinkle the map so that Seattle and Chicago were right next door to each other, and I was not able to do any of that. But with each time that I said it, it got easier. And I was delighted to find that the healthy people in my life were totally cheering me on. Instead of being horrified, like, what did you just say to me? They were like, thank you. And it's one of those things that's sort of contagious. It's like anything, like when you're around people who work out, you want to work out. I mean, I don't because I never want to work out, but I think about it more when I'm around people who are healthy, right? When you're around people who practice a healthy rhythm of yes and no, you're setting the people around you free to do the same. So the more I was being intentional and careful about my life, the more my friends were cheering me on to do it. And the more they did it, the more I did it. So there was a work thing that came up, and it was like a friend needed me to kind of bail him out, and it was going to require me leaving one event to fly to another city, to wake up early, but I was ready. I was like, Coach, put me in, like a good soldier, right? And right at the very last minute, I realized, this is the exact thing that got me here. It's me deciding to be the good soldier at the expense of my family, at the expense of my sleep, at the expense of my own health, to prove to someone else that I love them and I'm going to be there for them. And so what I said was, I love you and I'm going to be there for you in my heart. I cannot get on that plane for this one. And I was so scared about what he would say. I so badly wanted him to think highly of me. And his response was, you're getting better at this. And I was so thankful. One way that I have sort of been thinking about it, and I would invite you to, I think this image is really helpful, is that I think of the word no as sort of like a scalpel. Picture like a knife and picture cutting away the things that don't fit, the things that aren't for you, the things that have been making your life overly frantic, that have been leaving you exhausted, the yeses that got away from you. Think about the word no as sort of a scalpel that you can use to carve away, and what you're left with is the life that's yours. What are the things that are most important to me in my life? For me, it's my relationship with God, it's my connection to my own soul and body, and it's the three boys in my life, Aaron and Henry and Mac. That's the center of the center. And I held those things right in the center, almost like the center of my field of vision as every time I had to make a new decision. How will this decision affect these things? Because these are the things that matter most. And it began to matter less and less that someone at my publishing house thought I was fabulously responsible, or that my neighbor, trusted me to get this, and this done for her. Those roles and those affirmations became less and less important as this center became more and more the center of my vision. And holding those things at the center, it was like a compass, like a guide for me. This is the way forward. When I hold these things in the center, I know the way forward. And what helps me just kind of on a practical level, again, is I think about these concentric circles. And the center of the circle, my boys, my family, my best friends, my closest colleagues, my team, my community, and then the people kind of that you work with very rarely or that you know just a little bit. And in my experience, these are the people to whom you owe the best of yourself and that you really rarely want to disappoint. And then these people, it's okay if sometimes they're not getting everything they want from you. And these people, it's really easy to say no to them because they're not the inner circle that you've committed most of your life to. So I think about it like, where does this person fall? And I always make the mistake of thinking, oh, no, this person's definitely in my inner circle. And then I take a step back and I go, no, they're not. It's okay. They will be okay with this. And what you start to find is that as you start articulating healthy yeses and nos, as you start building a rhythm of living that's sustaining and life-giving and marked by rest and marked by grace, it's sort of contagious and it's sort of inspiring. And so your community, little by little, will change. The rhythm of your family, little by little, will change, because this healthy way of living is attractive to everyone who wants that same thing. So many of us are just aching for a slower, more connected way of living. When you see someone else doing it, you're like, oh, I want a little bit of that. So when you make these changes, it's not just about you. It's about your family, it's about your neighborhood, it's about your workplace, it's about your kids' school. That ripple effect starts with those hard yes and no's and then goes on from there. Soon, families are changing and communities are changing and churches are changing, because little by little, individual people are realizing that we get to decide how heavy, how big, how robust, how small our lives are. We get to decide those things.